We are now going to have our last session of the day. And as much as I've enjoyed everything, I imagine you're like me, your brain is full. Yeah. So, but we saved the best for last. So, yeah. So these are my three colleagues from the other three regional compacts. And I think I've mentioned more than once that we collaborate under the umbrella of what's called NCOER, the National Consortium for Open Educational Resources. And this was, again, something that Tanya Spilavoy really helped us pull together and create. So I'd like to thank her for that and acknowledge that. We have, I'll give you their names, but then I will let them do any additional introductions themselves. So we've got Liliana Diaz from WICHE, which is the Western Compact. We have Elle Davis from SREB, the Southern Regional Education Board. And we've got Laura
Robert-Rivera.
Robert-Rivera, that's right. So from NEBHE, the New England Board of Higher Ed. So you're going to get to hear about all the work we've been doing together, but also in their regions and just how different things can be for all kinds of great reasons. And so I will leave you guys to it.
Amazing. So on that note, I'm just going to highlight the first few slides. This is kind of, you might have seen this before. This is how the compacts have divided the U.S. And basically, this is just an overview. It's yellow. I mean, does it say it? Oh.
WICHE.
Yes, WICHE is yellow, MHEC is red, green is SREB, and then blue is the New England Board of Higher Education. Please note that the gray states neighboring us are not part of any compact. So I will actually touch a little on that, but just.
I used to live there. Do that.
And this is the mission and vision of our work. And it's just kind of bringing all of our compacts together to collaborate on open education and make sure that we can scale the awareness and adaptation at a national level. And so now I will get started with my section of the presentation. So hi, everyone. As Jenny said, my name is Laura Robert-Rivera. I am so honored to be able to be here and present to you on behalf of the New England Board of Higher Education, NEBHE, and their team, especially for those that helped me build this slide. I have a member of our team back here, Amy Knott, and Lindsay Gabush, who is unable to attend. She's on maternity leave, but she is was a big part of making this presentation possible. So I wanted to just give her a shout out. So to start us off, I will start by saying that the Open Ed Initiative at NEBHE started in 2019, and it was to build upon the coordinated strategies that the states were doing and enhancing their work and accelerating it forward. So since then, we'd had a planning grant from the Hewlett Foundation. After that, in 2020, we got a second grant that was focused on increasing educators' capacity and awareness on open education practices and social justice. And then building on the success of that grant, last year, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation awarded NEBHE a second 2-year grant to continue its efforts in increasing awareness, use, and analysis of open education, and to serve the broader open education community with resources, infrastructure, to guide course marking initiatives. So although I could talk about course marking forever, and please come and find me later if you want to do that, in this presentation, I'm excited to expand on the capacity building efforts in our region and share best practices and lessons learned. Oh, sorry, I got a little ahead of myself. So just in summary, this is our region's efforts. Thanks to Annika, NCOER was able to do a state capacity assessment. Please note, as I mentioned earlier, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania are not part of the compact, but we are hoping to expand our efforts to support their work. And in fact, our course marking work right now that is focused on the Northeast. And so we have one of our grantees institutions is in New York. So at a quick glance at the summary, we can see that Connecticut and Massachusetts out of the 9 states have met most of the criteria for capacity of OER. 3 states are lagging behind, and then 4 states, Maine, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Vermont, did not meet any of the criteria. Later in the presentation, I will discuss a little bit of why that might be the case. But for now, we're going to focus on what is working. So for starters, Connecticut. So Connecticut is one of the leaders in open education in the Northeast, with legislation that supports both public and private institutions across the state in adopting OER. Initial investment was of $75,000, and it's specific to OER grants. In that time, they also passed some legislation which established the Connecticut Council, and its primary mission is implementing OER. This council is still active and is awarding grants to faculty across the states. In terms of community engagement, the state directly provides funding to faculty development. They are members of and the Open Ed Initiative. For supporting institutional capacity, please refer to the notes newsworthy section in the slide. And that tells you a little bit more of CSCUs, so Connecticut State and Connecticut College and University, which includes Connecticut's community colleges, have a NOLO campaign, which essentially is facilitating course marking at a system level. Then we have Massachusetts. So Massachusetts has a statewide policy on OER, which was issued by the Board of Higher Education, and it encourages the use of OER and provides resources. This policy was initiated in 2018 by the Commissioner Carlos Santiago, and he established an OER working group. In October of 2019, the working group submitted recommendations to expand OER use on campus and provide counsel on statewide implementation. These recommendations were accepted, and in the next slide, I'll kind of guide you through kind of what that looks like now and the outcomes that it's coming from that working group. But while still on this slide, I did want to highlight the newsworthy section again and talk about another big initiative that they have, where 6 institutions have been awarded federal grants, the Open Textbook Pilot, which I have been informed is no longer a pilot for the last 5 years, but it's still a pilot. And which in Massachusetts, they're using to develop inclusive resources that reflect the local lived experience. And so they've built a program called, I'm going to say it wrong, Rotel? Yes. Which remixing open textbooks through an equity lens. Another things to highlight in their capacity is that they have a communication and marketing plan. They have also incorporated OER into their state action plan for education regarding technology and infrastructure. They have a website, repository. Their authoring tool is Pressbooks, and they annually host an OER 101 training for faculty and have events around Open Access Week and Open Ed Week. So this is a little more in-depth as to the work that the OER working group has put together. They have significantly propelled forward the work in the state. Something to note from this development is that they created a course marking implementation guide that has been leveraged with OER key performance indicators to provide a method to assess the impact of course marking in Massachusetts. In 2023, the first set of data that was reported, and it demonstrated close to $8 million worth of student textbook saving in the fiscal year 2022. Finally, on the states we're highlighting, we also have Rhode Island. We're highlighting them because even though Connecticut and Massachusetts have a more coordinated effort at the moment of increasing OER, Rhode Island was actually one of the first in the country to initiate the state efforts in 2016. Governor Gina Raimondo, who is now the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, challenged 11 state institutions of higher education, both public and private, to save students $5 million in textbook costs over 5 years using openly licensed textbooks. They funded OEN memberships and mini grants for public institutions, and this actually, and the office, which was the Rhode Island Office of Postsecondary Commissioner and the Office of Innovation. That office has been dissolved. So that's kind of starting to lead into some of the barriers and things that have unfortunately affected Rhode Island's momentum. So some of it is that there was no funding for private institutions. So therefore the burnout happened a lot faster. The second was that the office was closed and there were no longer any coordinating efforts on a statewide the pandemic interrupted the data collection, and because of this, there has been no formal assessment that has been able to be collected. From these lessons learned, we'll kind of go into the next slide, which talks a little bit about the barriers in capacity building in the region. So on top of kind of the things we already kind of mentioned, faculty capacity, especially during COVID, was lost a lot of its momentum. And then with the administrative turnover, that was also one of the leading causes why in Rhode Island in particular, the initiative has fizzled. Another major challenge in the region is, as you might also be familiar with, competing priorities, especially in New England. Many institutions are small independents and they're struggling to keep their doors open. So this is just not a constant priority on their list. When engaging with rural states like Vermont and Maine, the major barriers are the digital divide and access to reliable and consistent internet. And finally, inclusive access. In Connecticut in particular, a state that has great capacity and has put a lot of its finances into supporting institutions, course marking initiative, et cetera, the inclusive access is infiltrating the public systems, and they, at a state level, are now doing inclusive access, which threatens kind of the work and the investment that has been made thus far. On a better note, NEBHE is, like all of our counterparts, compacts, is always looking toward you who are doing the work on the ground to figure out, kind of guide our work and figure out how we can support and engage the needs that are in the region. So as part of that, in our region in particular, there's an interest in bridging the gap between publics and privates, especially recognizing that for private institutions, independents, carrying out the work without state funding is a big issue. So our current course marking initiative is focused on supporting 4 independent institutions with a threshold greater than 27% of Pell eligible students. Another big component that NEBHE has spent a lot of its manpower trying to reinforce is the professional development. It's a huge piece of what capacity building is for us in the area, and to make it sustainable. So we're constantly developing resources, hosting webinars and workshops to support practitioners in the region. We also have policy development, so to ensure that we're supporting states' efforts and making it sustainable. We have a regional advisory committee that is helping us understand the needs of the region and also take note. Yes. Also, an important note is that NEBHE cannot lobby. So our efforts are really more focused on helping institutions build capacity, not necessarily the states. And this is kind of where the Regional Advisory Committee has been able to help us understand how we can kind of help at that level. So on top of that, working with NCOER, we've been able to understand the national landscape and not recreate the wheel each time. And then finally, the last action that I will kind of highlight, and this came from our advisory committee, is that they highlighted how challenging it is for practitioners to engage with leadership about open education. So to address this, in August 2022, we held a senior leadership summit with the Equity Imperative, where we had a full day of programming to help attendees like provosts, deans, directors understand how OER aligns with DEI goals, and ultimately kind of hoping to build more capacity for the institutions. Now I will pass it on to my counterpart in the South, Elle Davis from SREB. Thank you all for your attention.
Hello, everyone. So yes, my name is Elle Davis. I'm actually our program coordinator. This position that you're really seeing is a program specialist, which we're hiring for right now. So really my role here today is to share some of our states that have differing capacities. I'm going to share 2 of them, which is Oklahoma and Arkansas, which specifically will show sort of the spectrum of like funding and resources and how they are beginning to start the work of prioritizing OER. So to start, let's go with Oklahoma, where they have been working with OER since 2018. They have an online consortium, and they're actually funded. They have a budget item on their state level, so they're getting, I think, about $300,000 to start. And those funds really for the last 2 years have been prioritized for faculty development and creation. So they're giving scholarships to their faculty members who are explicitly prioritizing no-cost OER resources, and they're verifying that through their syllabus and conversations with their the institution individually. For the last 2 years, they're saying the first year they had very low awareness. And so they were not able to give out as many scholarships as they wanted. They reached about 81 of 200 scholarships that they wanted to give out. But they just experienced for the 23-24 fiscal year, about 180 of the 200 scholarships that they wanted to give out as the awareness for OER is picking up in their state. I was talking to sort of the consortium lead who's piloting a lot of the work, and really he brought up that this is institution driven. So it is coming from their state as we are prioritizing this. And this is probably why they have the budget to give out these scholarships to a lot of their institutions. But with that, they have a lot of investment from the institutions themselves, where the institutions are paying into the budget to develop things like press books, and then the region is taking on the retention fees to retain those press books over time. I thought a really good resource that Oklahoma shared with me was around partnering with the AAC&U. They have an OER Institute, which they partnered with for a year, and that was able to help them develop how they would set up these grants, how they would fund individual staff members or faculty to create OER resources. And he felt like for that year that they developed that, that's really how they were able to even get the 81 for their initial year, and that the word of mouth of that program really helped them to improve the awareness for the second year. I have a lot of notes for Oklahoma. They seem to be doing very well. For them, they are really the ones who are, for our ed tech group, really piloting and bringing a lot of resources to our other states that are having a little bit more difficulty getting started, even to get someone staffed in OER to start the work. But the other state that I wanted to talk about, Arkansas, I wanted to talk about how just faculty level can be just as powerful as states that have budgets. We have a librarian who, their story of their community college is they had a library or textbook partner that they lost a partnership with that organization, and the librarian, she was tasked with creating a repository of open education resources, and really that's how she became a part of the OER work. I think this is a really good example of how a grassroots approach, even at a small community college, is taking off for the OER resource, because just with her network alone and our partnership with SREB, it really allowed her to start her own state action team. And so this is the second year of her state action team, where they're meeting quarterly, really discussing some of the challenges and barriers of bringing OER into different organizations. They don't have funding yet. That is one of their primary priorities, is to get a state legislature or policy for OER so they can begin to get budgets. Their other priority is really access to teachers and development, because they have the repository for low cost or no cost books for their students, but they don't have necessarily the access to teach or train faculty to use them and to bring them into developing more using OER resources. So their number one thing right now is to bring in access to teachers. They have a really great K-12 attachment or connection to OER, but in the higher education level, they want to expand that and to reach into their state legislature to get policy around resources, really. I wanted to share a few other things, but yes. Oh, I wanted to talk about sort of our partnership with the other compacts and how we're working together. Mostly with SREB, it's a more, I guess, established, compact, but we have a large array of programs, mostly K-12. Our higher education is where our OER work is centered, mostly for post-secondary specifically. And we are learning a lot about a lot of our powers is convening conferences, setting up research and publishing for a lot of the institutions that are doing the work. So that's how we're supporting our state actions team, is to help them create structures, like one of the sessions earlier talking about how to bring in money, how to bring in or energize staff, using platforms or getting partnerships with platforms that will host their repository or their content hubs. So those are the way that we're supporting some of our states.
Hi, everyone. How you doing? It's that time in the day, right, where we're all kind of struggling. So I don't really have a lot of slides, and I really appreciate Meg and Jenny and her team having us here to present to you the kind of the differences and uniqueness of the regional compacts, because we all have different approaches to how we work with our states. So my name is Liliana Diaz, Solodukhin. I'm a senior policy analyst at WICHE. I've been there about 4 years. And I'll be honest, when I got hired, my boss said, "You're going to be working on OER." And I said, "What is that?" And that was 4 years ago. So WICHE didn't really have a lot of OER activity that it was doing to support our states up until 4 years ago. I know Dr. Tanya Spilavoy had created this partnership and was kind of launching it and coordinating, and that's why I was hired in my position. So it's been a learning experience for myself to be able to support our states and a learning curve. So I'm here to learn from you all as well, because you all are experts in your respective areas, and there's a lot to learn. So I enter this space with humility and understanding that I'm learning as you all are learning, and I'm learning from you all. So WICHE has taken a very unique way in how we support our states, more of a regional effort. So I really am jealous of the MEC structure, because you have all these beautiful like state action teams. However, for the West, that would be very difficult to emulate, partly because our states and our regions are very diverse, as well as the governance structures of our states, the political climates of our states, as well as WICHE is 16 states and all the Pacific territories and affiliated states. So this includes Guam, Mariana Islands, Marshall Islands, the Republic of Palau, Republic of Micronesia. I'm sure I'm butchering some of those. So they have very different governance structures in their territories and countries in and of itself. So how we support their OER efforts are going to look very different than how we support OER efforts stateside, including Hawaii and Alaska. So very different approaches. So what we've done is that we've taken an individualized approach to each of our states. So what we did is we created the OER West Network, where we brought together folks that are working on OER from their respective states to talk to each other across state lines and across territories and Pacific partners. Because there's a lot of learning that can be happening across state lines because of those different governance strategies. But sometimes we get stuck in how we're doing things in our state, and we're like, okay, we hit a brick wall. And so we created this community so folks could connect with others across state lines and see what's working in Colorado and see if it could work in Oregon, or see if what's working in Idaho could work in Arizona. So there's a lot of peer-to-peer learning that is occurring at the regional level. So that's why we decided to create this regional network of folks so they could learn from each other, best practices as well as challenges in each of their states. And then WICHE has taken that individualized approach by engaging our states in strategic planning, so which you did today. So we did that at our first convening in 2023. 2023, where we actually pulled the strategic plans for each of our institutions or each of our participants in that in-person convening. And we actually had them dive deep into those strategic plans and to identify, how does OER or your open education efforts align to the strategic priorities of your institution, of your system if you were from a system, or from your state if you were a state level coordinator, because we have also a lot of diversity within our network. And so they were able to do some strategic planning as to, like, what is the argument that you need to make to your provost, or what is the argument you need to make to your chief academic officer? What is the argument you need to make to your state legislature that aligns and positions OER as a tool to advance whatever goal it is that you want to advance in your state? In some states, they want their state legislature to appropriate funds for OER open education support. In other states, they don't want their state legislature to touch it or to even know what OER is. Hence why we really had to take this as an individualized approach for each of our states, because in some states, if the legislature touches it, it risks those efforts that have been led grassroots. And so we can see that, for example, I don't know if Hawaii wants me to share this, but a legislator in Hawaii found out about OER, loved it, ran with it, passed a policy, or wanted to pass a policy that would require all faculty to use OER.
Oh, no.
Guess what happened? Right? There's laughter. So of course the academic or senates in Hawaii were definitely like, excuse you? And so definitely that definitely put off some faculty from OER. So we don't want to recreate those things in different parts of our region. And so that is something that we learned about from Hawaii in one of our meetings. And then the next day, the Alaska legislature wanted to hear about OER. So what did those folks do? They got together in Alaska. They talked about what they would present and what they would not present to their legislature, so they wouldn't recreate some of the issues that Hawaii had run into. So that's kind of the original approach and the individualized approach that WICHE takes to supporting OER in our states. Additionally, we make sure that we recognize the political environment of each of our states. So, we work with California. I know some of you have heard of College of the Canyons and their OFAR, their OER for anti-racism curriculum, which is fantastic. But if we were to share that or present that in a state like Idaho, we would be run out of the state. So there are some challenges working with very politically diverse states, and we have to understand those political landscapes and what we can and cannot do, and how we operate and how we operationalize the work in those states. Hence why we kind of have to individualize it to each of our states. Additionally, the current infrastructure and the governance of our states. So we have some states that have a fantastic capacity because they've built it up to the state level. So for example, we have Colorado that has the OER Council, Colorado OER Council, where it's pretty much every institution in the state is part of this OER Council. And as a collective, they actually came up with what they wanted their OER efforts to look like at the state, and how they would pitch it to their SHEO office, so the SHEO office could then turn around and present it to the state legislature. But they did that collectively across institutions in the state, 2-year, 4-year, private, public. They're all working collectively, and they planned their annual OER conference. They received $5 million for the next 5 years, so what is that, $25 million overall, to do OER work and to fund grants to their institutions to do that work, which is fantastic. And I know the governor is very supportive of OER efforts in Colorado. Similarly, Oregon right now is looking at what they're going to pitch to their state legislature in 2025, and they have a state level OER coordinator that works with their institutions. So 2 different models that work very well to build capacity for them. In other states, unfortunately, there's too much competition among the institutions and among the sectors for them to play nice. I won't mention those states because I don't know if they'd want to be mentioned, but it's a different approach in how we work to advance OER and scale it in those states, knowing that there's a lot of competition among the institutions and among the different sectors. So there's a lot of representation from community colleges in some of our states, where the 4-year institutions may be a little bit more reluctant, and how do we create strategies to kind of bring them forward. And also that comes hand in hand with understanding the capacity for each of our states and the desired results. What are the desired goals for each of our states? So we definitely ask our states, what do you want at the end of the day your OER or your open education efforts to look like? And then we mold our approach that way. I think that's been very fruitful. WICHE is not in the business of telling states what to do. We're more of like, what can we do to support your work? And that has led to the identification of a couple of things as a region. First, we need more empirical evidence of the impact of OER on student outcomes. When states want to make the pitch to their state legislature, they care about affordability, but more so they also care about what's the impact on student outcomes, student success. What are the graduation rates? What are the retention rates? What are the persistence rates? Especially as enrollment is decreasing among many of our institutions. So how do we address that? So WICHE is looking at time to completion for students that participate in OER, ZTC, textbook cost zero, whatever you designate it as. We're looking at student outcomes specifically to completion of their credential. So we conducted a pilot study, and we're hoping that'll be published in the fall if our journal publication is accepted. But we looked at data from one particular institution, and we found that students that participated in no cost, low cost were 2.5 times more likely to complete their degree than students that did not participate in no cost, low cost courses. Very impactful finding. Of course, you can tell already there's probably an issue with that. We had to roll it up to the no cost, low cost designation because the institution does not do course marking specifically for OER. They roll it up into a no cost, low cost designation. So that is one of the other ways that we've been trying to build capacity among our institutions, is to share that code book with them and say, if you want to measure student impact on OER efforts on student outcomes, specifically for time to completion, look at these variables. And secondly, if you are building or have built course marking, you need to make sure that you have it disaggregated by OER, no cost, low cost, and what are those definitions that correspond. Because if you want to do that empirical evidence that your administration is asking for to fund OER, it's very hard to make that argument when your lowest denominator is no cost, low cost. So that's something that we talk with our states about when they're building or trying to pitch for course marking, or if they already have course marking, how do they kind of drill down even further? So if you are on the verge of creating course marking, consider that as one of the challenges as you look to data analysis of the student outcomes on your campus. We are doing that study again with national participation now that we've done the pilot and kind of worked out a lot of the kinks. So if you have course marking for OER, no cost, low cost, ZTC, or whatever other course designation that focuses on that OER component, please connect with me, because we are asking for institution systems to participate in this national study. We would be able to analyze your data for free. We're not charging you. And then each institution that participates would receive an individualized report of your data and your analysis that then you can share to your administration or whoever you would want. There is some data that your IR department will need to pull out, but we do have data sharing agreements that your department or your administration would need to sign. And we do have a secure data environment that would protect that data. It's de-identified student level data, what we're seeking for. And it's very secure environment. The researchers are the only ones that have access to that environment and then run the analysis to conduct that study. So your data would be used to kind of explore across state lines, across institutions, the impact of OER, ZTC, so forth, on student outcomes. And then, of course, you get that data back for your individual institution, those analysis. So if you're interested in that study, participating, please connect with me after the presentation. You can email me as well. Pretty easy email address. It's ldiaz@wiche.edu. WICHE, it's up there. Elle Diaz, DIAZ. So please email me, and we'd love to have a conversation, consultation with our researchers, see if you have the appropriate data and the appropriate length of data, because we do need a couple years worth of data in order to have you participate. Now I want to shift to kind of something that the regional compacts are doing in collaboration with some of our partners, specifically Doers and Spark. We are inviting all of you to participate in a conversation on what a national strategy for open education would look like. So there's a set of webinars. I think the first one is February 7th. And there's 3 of them you can choose from. And we really just want to invite you all to come and share what you would want from a national strategy. So there's a lot of challenges that we're facing. You know, a lot of us are kind of fighting the waves of inclusive access, equitable access, and some of the challenges with why does our chief financial officer signing these contracts without actually talking to our faculty? What are other things that we want to see as an open education community? So we definitely want to hear from all of you kind of what this national strategy could look like, because there's a lot of organizations out there working on this, and we don't want to duplicate efforts, but we want to maximize the work that we're doing and the impact that this work can do. But we can only do that if we have a coordinated strategy. So we definitely want to hear from you all. You can sign up for those meetings on the WICHE website. If you wiche.edu/OER, you can just scroll all the way to the bottom and you'll see the calendar or the web page. You can click on it and it'll send you to that page. You can register for those meetings.
Got an email from Mac last week with the links to register.
Yeah, so Meg sent an email, so look out for it there as well. So those are the only things that well, there's a lot more I could share, but I know it's that time of the day where we all kind of struggle, and I definitely want to open it up for any questions you might have for all of us up here, for members of the other regional compacts. I know Jenny's in the back. I'm sure she'd be happy to answer any additional questions and things of that nature, so.
Well, while you're thinking, I'll mention, yes, everything that Liliana and you have all mentioned, we try to cover in our MEC newsletter and make sure that people know about those things, and we'll continue to do that. We'll try to keep you connected there. Oh, course marking. You all are probably aware that we are putting out some recommendations for course marking later this spring, and there'll be a webinar and a paper and all that too. So, and again, the big thing is think about the data you want to collect on the other end and what argument you would like to make with it. So I have lots of data questions, but I should not be the questioner. I should be the listener.
Just an update on the course marking. If you are a member of Doers, you will probably receive an email soon asking for your course marking policy and how you define OER at your institution, or however you defined OER, ZTC, whatever you call it. We're looking at common language as one of the projects for Doers for the research working group, partly because, again, if we want to do those high-level analysis, it's really difficult when different institutions have different definitions. So we're seeing what the possibility might be of standardizing some of those course marking definitions. We can't tell you what to do, but we definitely would want to provide maybe some suggestions or recommendations of what is predominantly being used in the community, so we could do that empirical and those empirical studies. So
Thank you all. I truly work with a wonderful group of people here, and like I said, not everyone who has been really pivotal in this work is here. I'm sad that Lindsay is not able to be here, but she has a lovely new baby and doesn't need to bring it into this weather. So, you can always reach out to any of the folks at our sister compacts, or reach out to us. We'll get you in contact. Hey, I heard they're doing something cool in Colorado. I'm like, okay, talk to Liliana. Or, they're doing something great in Massachusetts. Talk to Laura. So it is very helpful for us to continue to build these connections with each other. And I thank you all so much for being such great partners.